Chapter 10. How Memories, Associations, and Beliefs Manage Environmental Information. From the moment we are born into this world, our existence acts as a force on the physical environment. We take up space that cannot be occupied by anyone or anything else. And, in turn, the physical environment acts as a force on our physical senses, creating a cause and effect relationship between ourselves and the environment. It is important for you to note now and for the rest of the book that I am defining the physical environment in the broadest sense possible, as everything outside of ourselves, including other people. Now, at the most basic level, we create experience for ourselves by the mere fact that we exist. To exist implies that our senses are alive and that we are acting as a force, with the environment, altering its makeup and consistency as we move through it. For example, our movement and behavior set off an endless series of chain reactions that alter the landscape in some way, shape, or form. And even when we aren't actively changing or manipulating the environment in some way, we are still taking up space and thus subjecting ourselves to atmospheric forces, as well as causing changes in the makeup of the atmosphere from our breathing. Memories are stored as charged energy. The experiences that result from this constant interaction with the environment will be transformed into electrical impulses of energy. As electrical impulses of energy, the experiences will carry an electrical charge. The charge will be either positive or negative, depending on the kind of impact the environment had on our senses. For example, a crying baby is acting as a force on the environment. More specifically, the baby is creating a sound that is acting as a force on the eardrums of everyone in his vicinity. How the environment responds to this force will create experience for the child and determine the electrical charge or quality of energy that is recorded in the baby's memory. Quality of energy is the relative degree of positively or negatively charged energy in which the experience is recorded. For example, if the environment responds to the child with a soothing caress, expressing love and a sense that his needs will be taken care of, then the experience will be recorded in the child's memory with some degree of positively charged emotional energy. The degree of positiveness will depend on the intensity of the experience, that is, the degree of impact the environment had on the child's senses. Pleasant, happy, joyful, and loving experiences will result in the storage of positively charged energy. If, however, the environment responds harshly, in such a way as to have a violent impact on the child's senses, by screaming, assaulting his eardrums, or slapping him to produce physical pain, then the experience will be recorded in the child's memory with negatively charged emotional energy to the same degree as the intensity of the experience. There are two basic components that make up the quality of energy in which our memories are stored. The first is the polarity of the charge, which could be positive, neutral, or negative. The second component is the intensity of the charge, ranging from extreme positive, which would be an experience of maximum intensity creating a feeling of elation, to extreme negative, which would be an experience of unbridled terror. Quality of energy is an important concept for you to understand because it affects the type of beliefs we form about the nature of the environment, which in turn affects how we perceive information and interact with the environment. The characteristics of positively charged energy. Positive energy is expansive. It promotes mental growth or learning by creating a sense of confidence, which in turn results in an openness to explore and discover the unknown. I am defining the unknown as anything that exists as a possibility in the physical environment that does not yet reside in some form in one's mental environment. Positive energy perpetuates our natural, childlike sense of curiosity and wonderment toward the environment that we are all born with. By following the interests of our natural sense of curiosity, we interact with the environment to create experience and learn something previously unknown to ourselves, thus generating a sense of excitement about life, as well as increasing our ability to operate in the environment more effectively. Because we are continuing to learn more about the way things exist, there is a direct relationship between how much we have allowed ourselves to learn about the nature of the environment and the degree of negatively charged energy in our mental environment. I am stating it this way with the emphasis on the negative because learning will take place quite naturally if there isn't anything in the inner environment to stop it. In other words, an absence of fear, negatively charged energy, is a critical factor in determining whether or not we will make ourselves available to learn anything new and continue to grow mentally. For example, playfully throw a child up in the air and catch him and he will beg you to do it over and over again. This is his way of interacting with the environment to perpetuate the feelings of a positively charged experience. Positive energy is expansive, compelling us to interact with the environment to create more experience for ourselves. The more we experience, the more we learn about the nature of the environment. The more we learn about the nature of the environment, the better able we are to interact with it more effectively to fulfill our needs and achieve our goals. Positively charged memories give us that sense of confidence that allows to step out to try something new, resulting in mental growth. The characteristics of negatively charged energy. Now, throw the same child up in the air for the first time, as in the earlier example, but instead of catching him, accidentally drop him, and not only will he not ask you to do again, he will cower in terror at the very suggestion. The difference in his behavior, of course, is the result of the differences between the two experiences. In the first example, the experience was pleasurable, resulting in the storage of positively charged energy. In the second example, the experience was painful, resulting in the storage of negatively charged energy. Regardless of whether we were acting as a force on the environment, behavior motivated by our sense of curiosity, and got an unexpected or unintended painful reaction, or the environment, uninitiated by ourselves, other than the fact that we exist, acted as a force on us in a way that resulted in pain, the experience will result in the formation of a negatively charged memory. Painful memories will generate fear, causing us to perceive the environment as threatening in its ability to cause more pain in some future moment. The way we will perceive it as threatening will correspond to our memories of the experiences that resulted in pain in similar circumstances or conditions. The things we fear in the environment are those things we have learned to recognize as threatening. In contrast to the feelings of confidence and well-being that result from positively charged experiences, fear acts as a limiting or inhibiting force on both our behavior and our perception of environmental information. I am sure that everyone reading this book at some point has experienced the effects that fear can have on one's behavior. It can cause us to run from an obviously dangerous situation or completely immobilize us to the point where our body will not respond to any conscious command. Fear drastically limits our choices. It causes us to interact with the environment in ways that are limited to the structure of our memories, regardless of what the environment may be offering in the way of a new experience, or it causes us to avoid an experience completely. Interacting with the environment results in experience, and experience results in learning. If we experience the environmental present based on our individual past, or completely avoid experience altogether, we aren't learning what is being offered or available to be learned about the nature of the environment. The net result of a painful experience is that it creates a negatively charged memory, which in turn creates and perpetuates a cycle of fear. Cycles of fear then create cycles of discontent and dissatisfaction because we avoid experience. When we avoid experience, we cut ourselves off from the joy we feel when we are learning. Just as positive cycles are expansive, negative cycles are degenerative. Our painful memories keep us from learning how to interact with the environment in effective and satisfying ways that would result in happier and more fulfilling lives because we aren't learning what we need to know to experience something different. Fear limits both our range of behavior and our perception of environmental information. The ways in which it limits our behavior are obvious. However, there are many ways in which fear acts on our perception that aren't so obvious. In fact, some of the ways can be very subtle and difficult to recognize, until one learns what to look for. As traders, it is essential that you be able to observe the market's behavior from an objective perspective. To observe objectively, you will need to learn how to recognize a variety of subtle fears that will destroy your ability to be objective without really knowing it. This is a subject I will cover in much greater depth a little further on. However, before I can do so, you need to understand the nature of associations and how perception creates an energy loop between the inside mental environment and the outside physical environment. Associations. Associations seem to be a natural characteristic of the way in which we think. That is, our brains are wired in such a way as to link similar forms of environmental information together automatically. We do this in basically two ways. First, there is a natural propensity to label people and objects based on some prominent characteristic and then categorize them into associative groups. After we categorize the groups by sex, hair color, skin color, profession, economic status, educational background, and so on, we then associate whatever experience or knowledge we have about the group with everyone and everything that has those same characteristics. For example, if we have a painful experience with a person who has a skin color different from that of our own, we will automatically associate everyone with that skin color with the qualities of that one experience. The second way we associate is by linking extraneous sensory information with some event. We will automatically associate what we are smelling, tasting, hearing, or seeing along with the quality of energy of the primary experience. For example, a child getting spanked will associate all the other environmental information that his senses are inadvertently picking up with the pain he is feeling from the spanking. What he hears, smells, tastes, and sees will all be connected with the intensity of the force being applied to his body. So if there was some song playing on the radio or a distinctive odor in the air at the same time that he was experiencing pain, he will associate the song or the odor with the pain. Now, both these environmental distinctions, a certain song and a certain smell, will be connected with negative energy in his mental environment. When the child was getting his spanking, he may not have even noticed either the song or the smell because his attention was obviously focused in other directions. However, in the future, whenever he hears that song or smells that particular odor, they will automatically cause him to experience the negative energy connected with the spanking. Even if it is years later, and he is enjoying himself with the last thing on his mind being the memory of that spanking, if he hears that particular song or smells that particular odor, it will carry him back to that time as if it were the present moment, changing his experience from happiness to anger, sadness, or guilt. Of course, this same principle also works for positive experiences. A perfect example is many couples have a song that they associate with some intense sexual or loving experience. When they hear their song, it will mentally put them into the feelings of the experience the song is associated with. In fact, the song can eventually come to symbolize the quality of the entire relationship, where all the memories and emotions connected to those memories will run through their consciousness upon hearing the song. Associations are an automatic function of the way in which information gets organized in our mental systems. Most of these associations are inadvertent, meaning we have positively or negatively charged energy connected to various elements of the environment, and we aren't consciously aware of it. We can see, hear, taste, or smell certain things that, in turn, cause us to feel emotions and not know why, because we don't consciously remember connecting the extraneous sensory information with the primary event. The energy loop between the physical and mental environments. None of us has access to all the environmental information that exists in any given moment. Our senses aren't constructed to allow us to pick up, see, hear, touch, taste, or smell everything at once. If we can't be aware of it all, then we must have some mechanism by which we pick and choose what we do become aware of and give our attention and consideration to. What we learn creates an energy loop between the inner and outer environment. We can call this energy loop perception. Perception is recognizing, with our eyes, ears, nose, taste, and touch, in the physical environment what we have already learned about it. Mental energy works in conjunction with our physical senses to separate, categorize, and organize environmental information based on the distinctions we have learned to make. We recognize what we have learned in the environment because it is already inside of us. There has to be a mental framework to accept the information, otherwise, it gets rejected, labeled as meaningless, or not perceived at all, unless of course we are willing to construct a framework for it, being open to learn. Distinctions. Distinctions make separations in environmental information where no previous separation existed. A child won't make a distinction between a spoon and pencil until someone teaches him the difference. Otherwise, he will instinctively put both in his mouth, until the information stored in his mental environment acts as a force on his perception to distinguish between the two. Environmental objects give off information about themselves, but the information that is perceived already exists inside of each individual, unless it is a first-time experience. The spoon and the information about what it is create an energy loop between the inside and the outside, where before the distinction was learned the spoon and pencil would fall into the same category as something to put into the mouth. Anything we don't know, but exists in the environment as a possibility, is a distinction that we haven't learned to make yet. If we haven't learned to make the distinction, we won't perceive the various types of information the environment is giving off about itself. For example, if I were to open up my computer, what I would perceive would be very different from that of a skilled computer repair technician. All the various parts giving off information about themselves would mean almost nothing to me because there is no meaning inside of me. All the parts my eyes would be seeing would fall into that one large category because I haven't learned to make any distinctions between the various parts, whereas the technician would perceive the parts in a very different way because he understands the functioning of the parts and the relationship that they have with one another. That understanding is the mental framework that structures the particular way in which he perceives the parts. The parts would be giving off information about themselves that I couldn't perceive because I don't have the mental structure to perceive it. Learning how to read the markets to recognize an opportunity is another example to illustrate this energy loop between the inside and outside that we call perception. Traders act as a force on the market to move prices. Since most traders don't plan their trades or want to take responsibility for their outcomes, they are highly susceptible to acting out of any number of fears. Traders who are motivated to act out of fear generally aren't aware that their fear drastically reduces the choices they perceive as available, making their behavior very predictable to an objective observer, someone not caught in the same cycles of fear. So under certain market conditions, large groups of traders will all be trying to do the same thing, because of what they fear will or won't happen, upsetting the equilibrium, forcing prices to move in one direction. If you haven't yet learned to identify these conditions, you naturally won't perceive them when they exist, because there has to be an energy loop between the inner and outer environments for perception to occur. I am sure everyone has had the experience of reading unfamiliar material a second, third, or fourth time and perceiving something new with each subsequent reading. What is happening here? With each reading you are building a mental framework that enables you to recognize what was available but unperceivable to you when it was read previously. That is, all the new insight that you garner with each reading was available from the book the moment you picked it up the first time. However, you weren't able to perceive what it had to offer in the way of insights or understandings until you created an energy loop that enabled you to perceive it. Otherwise, the words get read but the insight goes by completely unnoticed even though you are looking right at it. In any given moment there is a vast difference between what each of us perceives and what is actually available in the way of possible distinctions from the environment's perspective. Take, for example, a salesperson who has learned to recognize the exact, most appropriate moment to ask for the order and close a sale. Or an auto mechanic who knows exactly what is wrong with a car by the kind of sounds that it makes. To the inexperienced salesperson or auto mechanic, these abilities will seem like magic because they will assume that they are hearing or seeing the same things as their experienced counterparts. However, that is not the case. They are not hearing or seeing the same information even though they are in the same sales interview or listening to the same car at the exact same moment. They are actually perceiving different environmental information because of the differences in the structure of their respective mental environments. The information that indicates the exact moment to ask for the order to close the sale is indistinguishable from everything else to the inexperienced salesperson. The same is true for the inexperienced auto mechanic. Consequently, neither one will perceive the existence of this information until they learn to make the appropriate distinctions. If someone wasn't there to teach them how to make these more refined distinctions that indicate the most appropriate moment to ask, they may never know about the existence of such information. By learning to make more distinctions, we increase the depth of our level of understanding of the cause and effect relationship between everything that exists. How our perceptions shape our experiences. We experience the environment through our senses. At the most fundamental level, the world gets transformed into electrical impulses of energy that carries information, as well as feelings and emotions ranging from extreme happiness to rage, elation to despair, love to hate, and all the degrees of feelings and emotions in between. Each first-time encounter with the environment creates a memory, distinction, or association that didn't exist previously. A first-time encounter is any experience that is completely unique, like learning the meaning of a word that we have never heard before, and there is nothing in our mental environment to relate it to. These new memories, distinctions, and associations build into a mental framework that constitute what we have learned about the nature of the outside environment. Once we learn something, mental energy will then act as a force on our senses to recognize in the environment what we have learned about it. So there is a two-way flow of energy. First, we learn something through some unique experience. Then, we perceive what we have learned in the environment. Fear is a perfect example for illustrating this concept. We feel fear when we recognize in the environment anything that we have learned can cause us pain. We will feel this fear and consequently have a fearful experience because the negatively charged energy in our memories, distinctions, and associations will act as a force on our eyes, ears, nose, and sense of touch to recognize in the environment anything that is similar to what we have already learned can cause pain. So when we perceive something, recognizing what we have already learned, in the environment, mental energy is acting as a force on our senses, instead of the environment acting as a force on our senses. In other words, the conditions are similar or identical to what we already know, and we can therefore attach some meaning to the information. The environment isn't creating the meaning as in a first-time encounter, the meaning is already inside of us. And in essence we create the experience by the way in which we perceive it, through our memories, distinctions, and associations. This is why a group of people can all be in the same location, be exposed to the same environmental information, and then afterward describe the event in a different way. The event was different for each individual because everyone experienced it differently. Their experience was a function of the structure of their mental environment. Each individual will make different associations with the same information and then experience the varying degrees of positive or negative energy connected with those associations. Each individual will make different distinctions with the same information, in effect placing a different meaning on it. Each meaning will be composed of varying degrees of positive or negative energy, thereby creating a different experience relative to everyone else's. Each P-ers on will experience the amount of time the event to occur differently, depending on whether they are perceiving the experience with predominantly positively charged energy, time speeds up, or negatively charged energy, time slows down. Without taking all these mental variables into consideration, it is little wonder why people get so frustrated with one another when they can't agree on what happened. Everybody's version of what happened was unique, because the way each of us experience the outside environment is determined by how we perceive it, and how we perceive it is a function of what is already inside of us unless we are in the process learning something new. The implications are that much of what we experience of the outside environment is shaped from the inside, not from the outside as most people would assume. In other words, our first-time experiences shape the meaning, as well as determine the quality of energy connected with that meaning, and then once the meaning exists inside of us, it shapes our experience of the outside by the way we pick and choose information and how we feel about that information. This is a very important concept, so I will give you another example to illustrate how our perceptions shape the way we experience the environment. Let's say that I am approaching a statue of a man. At first, I look at the statue face to face, and I experience indifference. That is, what I am seeing does not evoke any particular emotion. Then, I walk around the statue, and change my viewing angle until I look at it in profile. As I look at the profile, the face reminds me of a someone, an association, whom I like very much and whom I haven't seen for years. From this new perspective, the statue would take on a new meaning, changing my experience from emotionally neutral to some strong feelings of nostalgia as I think about how much I miss this person. The energy for how I experienced that statue in that particular moment in the environment was inside of me before I even looked at it. The energy that changed the feelings I was experiencing did not come from the statue or really have anything to do with that statue. My unique mental structure caused me to experience that statue the way in which I did. It took on a new meaning as I changed my perspective because of the way the energy that was already inside of me acted on my perception. If I hadn't had the positive experiences with the person the statue reminded me of, then I would have continued to experience indifference as I looked at it. The relationship between perceptions and emotions. The energy that determines how we feel, love/hate, happiness/anger, confidence/fear, etc., in many circumstances and situations does not come from the environment. These feelings and emotions are already part of us, and we will automatically feel them when there is a match-up, perception, between what is outside in the now moment with what is already inside of us as a result of our past experiences. For example, imagine a father holding his 5-year-old son with one hand, screaming "You stupid idiot," while spanking him with the other hand. And let's assume that this is the first time the child has heard the word stupid or idiot. Now he may not know what the words mean in an adult context, but he will most certainly connect the words with pain he is feeling through both his body as well as his ears. From that point forward, these words will have a strong negative charge attached to them in his mental environment. Now, when he encounters these words in the environment again in some future moment, he will be able to recognize them because he has experienced these words. They exist as a distinction in his mental environment. As a result of the way in which he learned the meaning of these words, how will his perception of them affect his experience of them? Whenever he hears the words stupid or idiot, he will feel the negatively charged energy connected to these words in his mental environment and consequently experience the physical environment in a painful way. Does the environment need to physically assault him, as in the first experience, for him to feel this pain? No. All he has to do is hear the words and he will experience pain. After his first encounter with these words, the pain doesn't have to come directly from the environment because it is already inside of him. Would it make any difference if, from the environment's perspective, that the words were spoken with absolutely no intent to cause him any pain or without any awareness that they could, in fact, cause him to feel pain? Again, no. He would not be able to perceive the intent of the environment as anything but wanting to cause him pain because that is exactly what he experiences when he hears those words. How could he know that other alternative meanings exist for these words or that they can also be used within a context of good-natured fun? He couldn't, because he has never experienced those words in any kind of fun context. He hasn't learned to make that distinction yet. From the perspective of his mental environment, there are no other alternative possibilities for the meaning of these words. Furthermore, he may never learn to make any alternative distinctions, because every time he hears the words stupid or idiot, he will perceive them in a painful way, thereby creating an experience of pain, which will in turn reinforce the negative energy already connected to the meaning for those words. From the first experience forward into the future, he will be locked into only one version of the way he can experience those words. In any given moment, there are a whole range of experiences available from the environment. What we experience as individuals will be a function of what we perceive, unless we are in a learning mode. In other words, what we are experiencing in any given moment is being shaped by what is already inside of us: memories, distinctions, associations, and beliefs, and what is already inside of us may not be remotely close to what the environment is offering in the way of experience. When we are in a learning mode, we open ourselves up to learn new distinctions and alternative meanings to expand what we know about the nature of the environment. Our experiences shape our meanings, and then the meanings shape our experiences of the future. Let me illustrate this concept for you. I was watching a local television program in spring 1987 called Gotcha Chicago. It was about some local celebrities who played practical jokes on other Chicago notables. In one segment of the program, the TV station hired a man to stand on the sidewalk along Michigan Avenue holding a sign that read "Free Money, Today Only." For those of you who are not familiar with Chicago, Michigan Avenue is home to many of the most expensive and fashionable department stores and boutiques in the city. The man's pockets were stuffed with cash, and he had been instructed to give money to anyone who asked for it. Considering that Michigan Avenue is one of the busiest areas of the city, how many people do you think took him up on his offer and asked for some money? Out of all the people who walked by and read the sign, only one person stopped and said, "Great, may I have a quarter to buy a bus transfer?" Otherwise, no one would even go near him. Eventually he grew frustrated and started crying out, "Do you want any money? Please take my money. I can't give it away fast enough." Everybody just walked around him as though he didn't exist. He approached one businessman asking, "Would you like some money?" And the man responded, "Not today." The plant said, "How many days does this happen?" As he tried to give him a handful of cash, while continuing to say, "Would you please take this?" The businessman responded with a terse no and walked on. Now here is a situation where the environment was expressing itself in a way that only one person had the mental structure to perceive. For the rest of the people, there was no meaning inside of them that they could directly correlate with the actual environmental conditions. Other than the one person who asked for a quarter, nobody looked at the sign and said to themselves, "Great. Somebody is giving away free money. I wonder how much he will give me." People's responses to the conditions shouldn't be too surprising because we generally don't believe that money is ever free. And we can know what people believed about the situation by just observing their behavior. If they thought that it was possible to get free money, we can assume that they would not have walked by, ignoring the opportunity to get some. So the meaning they attached and what they experienced corresponded to their belief that free money isn't possible or nobody gives away money on the street, no strings attached. In fact, most people probably thought he was crazy, which would explain why people went out of their way to walk around him to avoid contact. However, the environment was expressing itself in exactly the way in which it was representing itself. The sign reading "Free Money" was the truth, but the information "free money" did not connect with anything in anyone's mental environment so that it could be perceived as the truth. There was a direct one-on-one relationship between what any given individual believed, what he perceived, and what he experienced, except for one man. Everyone else obviously did not believe in the possibility of free money. They probably perceived a crazy man and thus had an erroneous experience relative to the conditions. Now, the environment did not choose the meaning any of these people placed on the information it was offering. And if the environment did not choose, then each individual created his own experience out of the situation that was presented to him. There were a number of alternate experiences available, and each alternate experience would correspond to the type of belief someone would have about the possibilities. Beliefs. Beliefs create definitions, make distinctions, and shape our perception of environmental information by programming our senses to hear, see, and select information that corresponds with what we believe. Our experience of the environment will correspond to the choices we make, and these choices will correspond to the information that is perceivable. What is perceivable to each individual, however, may not have much of a relationship to what is available or possible from the environment's perspective. Each person in the illustration of free money would claim that what he experienced was, in fact, the true reality of the situation. What would cause them to believe anything different? People think of their beliefs and subsequent experiences as a fact of reality instead of a belief about reality. This is natural because beliefs create a relationship with the environment that is best described as circular or a closed loop. What I mean by a closed loop is that every component part in the process of how we experience the environment supports every other component, making everything seem self-evident or beyond question. These closed-loop systems that beliefs create are extremely difficult to open up. The belief controls the information coming into the mental system. The information that is actually perceived will be consistent with the belief, the course of action taken will be consistent with the information perceived, and the subsequent experience will support and reinforce the validity of the belief. This is a closed system that will not allow for the possibility of other alternatives because the experiences keep on reinforcing the beliefs, making the beliefs seem increasingly more self-evident and beyond question. Unless we are open or even know how to be open to new information that could lead to new experiences, we will experience the closed-loop nature of our beliefs every moment, assuming the whole time that what we experienced in each situation was the only possibility available. The people who walked by the man giving away free money didn't know they were completely oblivious to the possibility of the environment expressing itself in such a manner, even though the sign said free money. And if confronted with the same set of environmental conditions, again, they would behave the same way as the first time, not knowing that other distinctions are possible, even if they are remote. The perception and the experience have to match up because we can't experience something that we don't know about yet, unless we are open to the possibility that what we believe might be very limiting in relationship to what the environment is offering. Remember the man who refused to take the money even when it was being handed to him? He was being offered an experience that would have increased the number of distinctions he could make about the nature of the environment. Free money does exist, and he would have grown mentally as a result. Being given free money was obviously a distinction he didn't know about yet. And even though it would seem that free money would be a powerful incentive to question one's belief that it doesn't exist, it wasn't enough for this man. His beliefs obviously did not allow him to even remotely consider the possibility, again creating this closed loop, leading him to believe that what he ended up with or experienced out of this situation was the true nature of his existence, when all it really was a reflection of the true nature of his beliefs and how they manage environmental information. Beliefs define the parameters in which we perceive environmental information. All definitions by definition create boundaries. Beliefs will manage information in various ways to maintain a balance between the inner and outer environment. Any perceived imbalance will result in some degree of either stress or illusion. In maintaining a balance, many of our responses to environmental conditions are automatic because our beliefs make the response seem self-evident, when, in fact, under any given set of environmental conditions alternate experiences exist alongside of the experiences our beliefs locked us into. By inhibiting the flow of information into the mental system, beliefs do exactly what they are supposed to do. They limit our awareness of data so that we can learn in stages. If we believe that things exist in only one particular way, then our beliefs will act as a natural mechanism to block the acceptance of any conflicting information. Considering or accepting any new or conflicting information would open up choices that we ordinarily would not have to consider. Too many choices too soon can cause confusion and mental overload. If it were not for the limiting nature of beliefs, what would happen to our minds would probably be similar to what it would be like if a television set picked up all the information being broadcast from all the TV stations and projected that information onto the screen simultaneously on the same channel. Beliefs allow us to tune into one channel of environmental information at a time so that we can learn about the nature of the environment through that one channel. Then we can expand our awareness to pick up another channel as we learn how to deal with the additional choices we are confronted with as we become aware of the additional possibilities. How our fears function to create the experience we are trying to avoid. What we perceive is a function of the distinctions that we have learned to make. What we focus our attention on, out of all the distinctions we have learned to perceive, is a function of the intensity of the energy in the perception loop. We only have so much of our conscious attention to give to whatever information happens to be available in any given moment. Fear, high degree of negatively charged energy, has a profoundly limiting effect on the range of information that we can pay attention to. It causes us to narrow our range of perception to focus our attention onto the object of our fears. How else could we avoid what we perceive as threatening? Learning to drive is an excellent example that illustrates how fear narrows our focus of attention. The dangers of driving are obvious even to someone who has never driven before. It isn't too difficult to imagine the harmful effects of a head-on collision. Without having developed the necessary skills to control the car, the new driver would lack the confidence to know that he can respond appropriately to any given situation. That is, he doesn't trust himself. As a result, he will feel some degree of uncomfortableness or fear when he drives. The fear will, in turn, cause him to focus his attention on the oncoming traffic or concentrate on the eye/hand coordination necessary to keep the car in the appropriate lane. Because he is so focused on what he can't do and what may happen as a result, he has little if any of his attention available to do anything else, like carry on a conversation with a passenger, notice the scenery in his peripheral vision, or even read road signs. All this other environmental information is available and perceivable, but in his case it is either blocked or unnoticed because he has to devote so much of his attention to the object of his fear, the lack of control he has over the car. At the point where he becomes comfortable with his ability to drive safely, his field of awareness will open up, allowing him to perceive all this other information. The purpose of fear is to help us avoid those things in the environment we have learned to perceive as threatening. However, when we couple our painful memories with our natural propensity to associate and group environmental components together, instead of avoiding the object of our fears, we will actually create the very experiences we are trying to avoid. For example, a child severely bitten by a dog will quite naturally associate all dogs with the threat of pain and consequently generate an intense fear or even terror whenever he encounters any dog in the future. The child's fear of all other dogs other than the one that bit him is real. He has no way of making a distinction between a friendly and a dangerous dog because his personal experience has taught him that all dogs are dangerous. Because of this natural propensity to associate, all we need is one first-time experience to believe that all dogs are dangerous. That is his truth about the nature of the environment. However, his truth is not all the environment has to offer in the way of experiences in relationship to dogs. Not every dog that exists is dangerous. Quite the contrary, very few would be considered threatening. Most see a child and want to play. Now, in every chance encounter the child has with a dog in the future, he will create an experience of terror, regardless of the disposition of any particular dog he happens to run into. If a dog makes any movement toward the child will perceive that movement as an actual attack when all the dog wanted to do was play or be petted. In fact, the child could become so afraid of being attacked that he will devote most if not all of his attention to scanning the surrounding environment for dogs. Eventually his senses will become attuned to picking up their sights and sounds, and every time he sees or hears one, he will create another terrifying experience that just reinforces his fears. His focus of attention will attract to his attention the object of his fear so that he can avoid what he has learned as threatening. The problem is that what he has learned is erroneous in relationship to the conditions, that not all dogs are dangerous. Not knowing that, he will naturally believe that his terror is coming from outside him instead of inside him. In effect, his fears are acting on his perception to create the very experiences he is trying to avoid by causing him to hone in on all the dogs in the environment. What we focus our attention on in the environment is what we will usually get. The dog biting example is a graphic illustration of this. However, there are other ways that our fears act as a cause to create what we are trying to avoid that aren't so obvious. Remember that all fears act on our perception as a warning mechanism to help us avoid what we believe to be threatening. One way to avoid the object of our fears is simply to refuse to acknowledge the existence of threatening information. Another more subtle way that will create some real blind spots in our perception is to focus all our attention on alternative, non-threatening, information to the exclusion of everything else. These blind spots will exclude whole categories of perceivable information from our awareness, which can result in some disastrous consequences, especially in the trading environment. For example, let's say that the market is offering us what we believe to be a good opportunity to make some money, so we go ahead and put on a trade, but at the same time we are also operating out of a fear of being wrong. We will fear being wrong because, if we are, it will force us to feel whatever negative energy has accumulated inside of us as a result of being wrong in the past. Now, if the market offers us a choice between information that would indicate we are right or information that would indicate that we are wrong, what information will we naturally focus our attention on? The information that will make us right, without acknowledging or considering the implications of the information that would indicate otherwise. Again, those implications could be disastrous. Let's look at another example of a trader who is afraid of losing. A fear of losing presents an obvious conflict because it would be difficult to put on a trade in the first place. However, for the sake of this example, let's say this trader was so attracted to a specific opportunity that he managed to operate outside of his fear long enough to put on a trade. Now, the kind of information he focuses his attention on will depend on what the market does. If the market goes against him, he will be afraid to confront the possibility of another loss, so he will focus his attention on any other non-threatening information. If the market happens to come back to his entry point, he will exit the trade in a sigh of relief, regardless of what the potential is for any further movement in his direction. But, if the market continues to go against him, his mental defenses will begin to break down as the threatening information becomes just too overwhelming for him to be able to block from his awareness any longer. At that point he could easily become paralyzed and not be able to do anything on his behalf. Eventually his stress and anxiety will become so acute that the only way he can relieve it is by getting out of the trade. On the other hand, if he finds himself in a winning trade, he will focus on completely different information. His fear of losing will cause him to focus his attention on what the market can take away from him. In a winning trade he will exclude from his awareness any information that would indicate what the potential is for the market to continue to move in his direction, which is the only information he focused on in a losing trade, and instead focus exclusively on information that will confirm his fears of the market, retracing back to his entry point or beyond. In effect, his fear of losing causes him to exit the trade early which is the only information he focused on in a losing trade, and instead focus exclusively on information that will confirm his fears of the market, retracing back to his entry point or beyond. In effect, his fear of losing causes him to exit the trade early for a small profit regardless of whatever the possible profit potential was in that trade. Once he is out, if the market continues to move in his original direction, he will agonize over the profits he left on the table and wonder why he just couldn't hang in there just a little longer, not realizing that his fear of losing actually caused him to lose all those additional profits. What you have just been given is an example of why the vast majority of traders cut their profits short and let their losses run. In a winning trade, the fear of losing will cause us to focus our attention on information that the market is going to take our profits away, compelling us to get out early. In a losing trade, we will focus our attention on just the opposite information, anything other than that which would indicate the trade is a loser. Fear causes us to act without a perception of choice. When we are afraid to confront certain categories of market information, it drastically limits the choices that we perceive as available. Cutting a loss isn't a choice if we systematically block from our awareness any information that would indicate that we are in a losing trade. Staying in a winner isn't a choice if we are consumed with the fear that the market is going to take away our money. To prevent these blind spots in our perception, we have to learn to trade without fear. And to trade without fear, we need to completely trust ourselves to confront and accept whatever information the market is offering about itself. And we need to be able to trust ourselves to know that we will always act in our best interests without hesitation, regardless of the conditions. Any endeavor will require some degree of trust. We would find it difficult to cross the street if we didn't trust ourselves to be able to get out of the way of the oncoming traffic. From a psychological perspective, the market environment can wreak just as much havoc in our lives as getting hit by a car. To be successful as traders, we need to believe that we can win with an absence of fear so we can make better assessments of the conditions and perceive more choices. What this means is that we have to do the necessary mental work to release ourselves from anything within us that would cause us to narrow our focus of attention or specifically block certain categories of information from our awareness.
Thank you for watching. Share this with friends and family, and please subscribe.